Today we are going to talk about the best classes to play in Diablo Immortal. I will cut this video into sections like the best free-to-play, best beginner, best PvE, and best PvP class. You can use timestamps to check out what you are interested in. And don't forget that these are my personal opinions. If you build your account in a certain way, you can perform pretty well with all classes. Anyways, let's start with the best free-to-play class. But first, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. If you check my playlists, you can find builds for all classes. Now that's out of the way, let's start talking. In this first section, we are going to talk about the best classes to play for free-to-play and low spenders. When it comes to low resonance accounts, the first thing you should do is decide your role. As you might know, secondary stats are really important, and improving all of them as a low spender will be close to impossible. Everything will be fine when it comes to PvE activities, but focusing on one or two secondary stats for PvP will be the best option for you. If you don't care about PvP, your main focus should be armor penetration for PvE activities, since it affects your damage output. It is the most important secondary stat for PvE. Now let's talk about the best class to start the game. First of all, if any of the classes look more appealing to you, just choose that class and start enjoying the game. If you don't like the class you choose, remember that you can change your class every 24 hours. But if you are looking for advice on a starter class, I can easily recommend the Necromancer. Your summons will help you all the way to the end game. But like I said, you will be just fine with any other class too. Just don't forget that to maximize your damage output, you will need to max out your mastery level on the class you choose. To do that, you need to extract legendary item essences, which you are going to do naturally while you play. That's why choosing the right class to start with is pretty important. For example, I chose Blood Knight with my brand new free-to-play account, and I won't change my class until I max out my mastery level. I would recommend you to do the same about maxing out the mastery level. I know that I didn't give you a straight answer to which class is the best to play for low spenders and free-to-play players, but as you can understand, you will be fine with any of the classes, especially when you just start playing the game. But in the current meta, I can easily recommend Blood Knight, Barbarian, Crusader, Demon Hunter, and Necromancer for low spenders and free-to-play players. These classes perform pretty well in the current meta. Obviously, I'm talking about PvP, since all of the classes are just fine at PvE activities. Now going back to the secondary stats, if you choose a more defensive class like Crusader and Barbarian, try to focus on armor. To do that, get Aquamarine gems from any normal gem rewards from Battle Pass, Hilt Trader, and any other sources. And focus on Sapphire gems if you play with a class that focuses on damage output. Do the same if you don't care about PvP and go for armor penetration. In the first section, we talked about the best beginner and free-to-play and low spender classes to play. Now we are going to talk about how each class performs in PvP activities in the current meta. Let's start with Barbarian. This class was in a really bad shape for so long, but after they released the essence for Demoralize, which makes you immune to all crowd control effects, Barbarian found its place among the best PvP classes. Especially if you have vacant spots to decrease the cooldown of Demoralize, it gets even better. Plus, you should focus on beneficial effect duration bonuses to increase the duration of Demoralize, Undying Rage, and Wrath of Berserker. If you do these, you will be a problem for the enemy team. Especially Wizards and Necromancers will be easy targets for you. On top of that, thanks to Undying Rage, you will be able to sit on the idol when it is needed, which is needed almost all the time to get the wins in Battlegrounds. It might not be the best option if you are a free-to-play player, since you will need to spend some money to awaken your rank 10 gems, but in general I would say Barbarian is one of the best classes to play for PvP. Just keep an eye on your Undying Rage skill and don't play with a blindfold on. It's not a hard class to play, so if you pay attention to the map and your cooldowns, you will do great. Next up we have Crusader, probably the most important class to get wins in Battleground. Since you can protect yourself and all of your party members from incoming damage with your Conjuration of Light skill, you can be effective and help your teammates greatly even with low resonance. If you can set up specific legendary gems for this class, you can become a problem for the enemy team in PvP activities even against higher resonance players. The essences, legendary gems, and the armor secondary stat play a huge role in creating a strong Crusader account. So I don't really recommend it to free-to-play players, since achieving all of this will take a long time without paying anything. But if you build your account in a specific way and focus on the right things, you can be a great Crusader without paying any money. Obviously, it will take some time, but it is possible. I will create a new video series in which I am going to talk about what gems and stats you should focus on each class, so if you want to learn details like that, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. In conclusion, if you enjoy playing as a support, Crusader is always a good class to play, and in the current meta, it is probably the most important class to get wins. It might get frustrating sometimes to play Crusader, but it is a really good class. Now let's talk briefly about Monk because there is not much to say about it. Unfortunately, as soon as this class became great in PvP, they chose to nerf it right away. I think Monk is one of the most fun classes to play with. But even if it doesn't get nerfed, you always experience delays and rubber banding with this class for months, and we are not seeing any fixes for it. Yes, it can be good with some builds, but it is not a good experience because of the problems I mentioned. If you decide to play Monk, you should know that you are going to be on the support side. There are some good damage dealing builds, but Blood Knight does everything better in that department, which has a pretty similar playstyle to Monk. Most of the Monk players just play Monk because they really like the class itself, and usually they don't change their classes at all. Probably Monk is the only class that has this die-hard fanbase, even though it is not the best class, and I find it pretty cool, because Monk was my favorite class in the first months of the game, but unfortunately it doesn't feel the same for me anymore. Since we mentioned Blood Knight, let's talk about it. After they launched this class, it became the community's favorite because it was overpowered. Since then it got tuned down a little bit, but it is still one of the best classes thanks to its high damage output, crowd control and iframe skills. In my opinion, Blood Knight took over the Monk's role in Battlegrounds. With this class, you focus on the back lines of the enemy team and try to take down wizards, necromancers and demon hunters. This class can be used with any resonance, but as you can guess, it gets a lot stronger with your resonance and secondary stats. I can recommend this class to anyone who wants to play at this role I explained. Especially when you master the class, you will be more impactful in the games you play. Now let's move on to the demon hunter. This is probably the best damage dealing class you can play right now. Until recently this class was not that good, but with the current meta escape dash build it performs really well. And this is not the only build you can play with it. There are pretty fun builds that you can try out and do great with it. Especially for low resonance players, it is a really good class since it can deal pretty high damages even without high resonance. But you can guess it gets way powerful with high resonance and high secondary stats. Once again, if you want to play with a damage dealer class, Demon Hunter will be a good choice. I mean, there is not much to say about it since it is a pretty simple class to play with, but since it's pretty squishy, your positioning and timing of the skills will be important. Next we have Wizard. I think this class is not as good as it used to be because it is pretty easy to kill. I mean, you can deal a lot of damage with it, but if you don't have high resonance, you are not going to be able to kill enemy players before they catch up to you. That will force you to play with more crowd control skills, which performs really well, especially against Crusaders. But if the enemy team has some good Barbarians and Blood Knights, your experience will be less fun. If you enjoy the class, you can find a way to be good, but I wouldn't recommend it to everyone. Don't get me wrong, if we had a perfect matchmaking, every class would perform really good, but we don't have that, and you will match up against a bunch of Barbarians and Blood Knights, which will affect your gameplay like I said. So in conclusion, it is not a bad class at all, but I wouldn't recommend it if you don't know what you are doing. It won't be fun for you. And lastly, we are going to talk about the most popular class of Diablo Immortal, the Necromancer. This class has always been really good since the game came out, and it still performs really well. I need to admit its impact is a little bit lower now because of the crowd control nerf, but it is still the best class to play for low spenders and free-to-play players because you don't need to have high resonance or secondary stats to apply crowd control effects. I mean, you can say you need potency, but actually not that much, because knockup animations don't get affected by potency or resistance. Animation duration of knockups is always the same, and with the most used PvP build of Necromancer, you get 6 knockups. That's why most of the low spender and free-to-play players choose to play with this class. So if you like to be that annoying person in Battlegrounds, you can choose to play with this class. Well, we talked about all the classes and how they perform in PvP nowadays. And now it is time to talk about PvE. And for this one, I'm not going to mention all of the classes one by one because every single class performs good enough in all PvE activities. That's why if you don't care about PvP, you should just play with the class you enjoy the most. But if you are looking for the highest damage dealing PvE class, you can go with Necromancer or Demon Hunter. Both of those classes can reach really high damage outputs. But like I said, my recommendation is to play with the class you have the most fun with. And you can always change your class and try out other ones, which I highly recommend because playing with just one class makes the game a little bit boring in my opinion. And that's all I wanted to talk about in this video. Let me know what your favorite class is right now in the comment section. Thanks for tuning in and take care.